Every day, you are told that an expiration date is the dividing line between safe and dangerous food. But what if that date is really more about protecting a company's reputation than your health? Up to half of us are throwing out perfectly good groceries, fueling a global waste crisis worth billions of dollars, all because of a system designed over 70 years ago for supermarkets, not science. The real story behind those printed labels is stranger, riskier, and more costly than anyone expects. You can see the consequences in your own fridge. So how did we surrender trust in our senses to a silent stamp? And what price are we paying for it? In kitchens, before the rise of mass production, food safety was a matter of skill, not packaging. A slab of salted pork, a crock of pickles, a loaf left to cool on the windowsill. Every meal depended on the judgment of the cook and the wisdom of the community. The first test was always the senses: a sniff for sourness, a glance for mold, a cautious taste. Families handed down tricks for spotting spoilage. Milk was poured into a glass and swirled, its scent checked for sharpness. Eggs were floated in water, the freshest sinking to the bottom. Bread was pressed for softness and then watched for the first green flecks. Preservation was a craft. Salt cured fish on the coast, smokehouses lined with hams in the south, root cellars packed with potatoes and apples for the winter. Honey sealed fruit from the air. Drying racks turned meat into jerky and fruit into leathery snacks that could last for months. In the absence of refrigeration, these methods kept food safe through seasons and storms. These were deliberate techniques built on observation and careful timing. Neighbors swapped advice at markets and over fences: how to spot a bad barrel of cider, when to toss the last of the jam. Trust in food did not come from a stamp on a package. It came from the daily dance with uncertainty, a reliance on experience and shared knowledge. This was a world where the senses were the first and last authority, and the consequences of a mistake were immediate and personal. The arrival of industrial food would soon challenge that ancient contract. Factories and freight trains quietly replaced the root cellar and the smokehouse. By the early 20th century, food stopped traveling from field to table in a single afternoon. Instead, it crossed hundreds of miles, stacked in crates and cans to serve distant cities. The shift was not just about machines, it was about scale and the logistics that followed. Nicolas Appert's breakthrough in canning grew out of Napoleonic France's need for reliable preserved rations. Glass jars gave way to tin. Before long, grocery shelves were heavy with products designed to last months, not days. That extra distance in time introduced new problems, spoilage and lost freshness among them, and the mounting risk of unsold goods piling up in the backrooms of ever larger supermarkets. Retailers faced a practical puzzle: how to keep stock moving before it turned. The answer was not more salt or smoke, but information. In post-war Britain, grocers like Marks and Spencer began penciling rotation codes on packaging, a system meant for clerks, not shoppers. By the 1950s, as supermarkets multiplied in the United States and Europe, those codes evolved and visible stamps emerged. Sell by and best before marks started as logistics tools, signals to restock, rotate, and discard long before a complaint reached the manager's desk. Distribution chains now spanned continents. Refrigerated trucks could carry milk from Wisconsin to California and oranges from Spain to London. Inventory management required precision. In Japan, convenience stores enforced the so-called one-third rule, discarding products after one-third of their shelf life had passed to guarantee a standard of freshness. Yet in many places, the date stamp never became dominant. Markets in Lagos and Mumbai still often rely on the vendor's word and the buyer's nose. The rise of the date stamp was not a universal law, but a practical solution to the problems of speed, distance, and scale. The old contract of trust was rewritten by logistics, not by scientists. 3 words now dominate the landscape of packaged food: best by, use by, and sell by. None of these dates is a safety guarantee. They are about quality. Best by is a promise from the manufacturer about when a product is at its peak flavor or texture. Crackers may stay crisp, coffee may hold its aroma, and chips may retain their snap until that date. When the date passes, nothing suddenly becomes dangerous. Use by is a softer boundary, most often on perishable items like yogurt or deli meat. It is the maker's estimate for how long the food will taste its best, not a hard stop for edibility. When foods have been kept cold, most remain safe for a few days after this date. Sell by is an instruction for store staff, not a rule for shoppers. It tells grocers when to rotate stock, so shelves show the freshest cartons and packages. After the sell-by date, stores may discount or remove an item, but the food itself often remains fine at home. These labels are about freshness and flavor, not safety. The true exception, where a stamped date can matter more than taste, shows up in the fine print for infant formula and a handful of high-risk foods. One product stands apart from the world of quality labels and marketing buffers. Infant formula in the United States is required by federal law to carry a true expiration date. That rule comes from the Infant Formula Act of 1980, and it means every can or carton must display a use-by date, an enforceable cutoff, not a suggestion. The reason is simple and unforgiving. Infants rely on formula for nearly all their nutrition, and even a small drop in essential nutrients can have serious consequences. By law, manufacturers must run stability studies that prove every nutrient, from vitamin C to iron, remains at required levels until the printed date, assuming the product is stored as directed. After that date, the formula may not just lose flavor or texture, it may fail to support proper growth or even put a child at risk for deficiency diseases. The FDA treats violations as product adulteration, with penalties that range from recalls to criminal charges. As food safety expert Dr. Carla Schwann says, true expiration dates like those on infant formula are rare, but when you see one, you follow it. For nearly everything else on the shelf, the date is about quality. For formula, it is about safety, no exceptions, and no guesswork. Not all foods carry the same risk when it comes to spoilage and safety. Some items are literal breeding grounds for dangerous bacteria, while others can sit on a pantry shelf for years with little change beyond a faded label. Fresh meats, poultry, and fish sit at the top of the high-risk list because their moisture and protein content make them ideal for bacteria like Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria. These bacteria can multiply quickly if the temperature rises above 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Soft cheeses and unpasteurized dairy also fall into this group. Listeria, in particular, survives and grows even in the cold of a refrigerator. Deli meats and prepared salads, often handled and sliced in bulk, have a short window before bacteria can take hold, so their dates matter more than most. On the other end are foods that seem to defy the clock. Dry pasta, rice, beans, and lentils resist bacterial growth because of their low moisture. Canned goods, whether beans, tomatoes, or tuna, are sealed and heat-treated, and can remain safe for years if the can is undamaged. Honey, with its natural acidity and low water content, has been found edible in ancient tombs. Chocolate, hard cheeses, and shelf-stable snacks like crackers and granola bars often outlast their best buy dates by months or even years. When they change, it is usually flavor or texture rather than safety. Think of these as low-risk items. Sorting foods into high-risk and low-risk groups creates a simple mental checklist. For high-risk items, the printed date is a line you do not want to cross. For most of the others, your senses offer the best guidance. Smell a sharp, sour odor, see mold or an off color, or feel an unusual sliminess, and you know to discard it. If those signals are absent, the food may still be fine even after its date. This mental sorting lays the groundwork for a practical toolkit on how to use your senses to judge what is truly safe to eat. The toolkit is a short sequence of checks. Verify storage conditions, check the date, look for visual signs, smell for off odors, and when appropriate, Reheat to recommended temperatures. Over time, this approach reduces waste while keeping safety the top priority. Keep the checklist simple, and the result will be fewer risky choices and fewer surprises. A carton of milk in the fridge does not care about the calendar on the wall. Its safety depends on temperature, not the printed date. Below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, bacteria such as Salmonella and E. coli struggle to multiply. Above that temperature, they thrive. The coldest shelf, usually at the back of the fridge, slows spoilage. The same rule applies to eggs, raw meat, and leftovers. Keep them cold, and you extend their life beyond any printed date. Senses become your most reliable toolkit. A sour whiff from milk, a sticky or slimy film on chicken, a greenish tinge on deli turkey. These are clear warnings. Bread that feels dry can be revived in a toaster, but the first visible sign of mold means it is time to toss it. Hard cheeses can be salvaged by trimming an inch around a mold spot. Soft cheeses should be discarded at the first sign of fuzz. Dry goods like pasta and rice are judged by sight and touch. Bugs, moisture, or off smells signal trouble. Canned goods will last years if the can remains unbroken, but bulging, rust, or leaks are red flags. For most foods, the decision path is simple. Check the fridge temperature, look, sniff, and touch. If it passes these tests, it is usually safe regardless of what the label says. Relying on your senses, backed by a steady 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the fridge, cuts waste and puts control back into the hands of the person holding the fork. Inside a food company's quality assurance lab, a product's shelf life starts with a battery of tests: microbial swabs, accelerated aging chambers, and sensory panels trained to notice the faintest change in taste or texture. The process is methodical. Samples are stored at different temperatures and humidity levels and then pulled at regular intervals: day 1, day 30, day 60. Each sample is inspected for signs of spoilage or a loss of quality. A quality assurance director, the quiet authority behind the scenes, reviews the results and faces a calculation that is as much about risk as it is about science. If the lab finds a yogurt stays safe and palatable for 35 days, the printed date rarely matches that number. Instead, a buffer, sometimes 20%, sometimes 50%, is subtracted. A carton stamped with a best by date of 21 days may still have weeks of safe life left, but that margin protects the company from complaints, lawsuits, and damage to the brand. This buffer is not arbitrary. It is shaped by past scares, like the 1985 listeria outbreak linked to soft cheese, which prompted stricter use by dating for high-risk dairy. Listeria's ability to multiply in cold storage forced companies to rethink how close to the edge they could set their dates. For ready-to-eat meats and soft cheeses, the margin is even wider, sometimes cutting the shelf life in half. The goal is simple: make sure that by the time a product leaves a store, it is still well inside the window of peak quality and safety, even if it spends extra days in a warm delivery truck or on a crowded refrigerator shelf. The result is a conservative system built to shield manufacturers from every angle. The printed date becomes less a literal measure of a food's true lifespan and more a legal and logistical safety net. What gets lost in the translation is how much eatable, safe food is quietly swept off shelves, not because it is dangerous, but because the math behind the date leaves so much on the table. A single household stands at the center of a much larger story. In one suburban kitchen, a half-full jug of milk slips quietly into the trash, still cold, just a day past its printed date. 2 unopened yogurts follow, then a bag of salad greens tossed because the label suggests caution. Multiply that by millions of homes, and the scale becomes staggering. Each year, American families throw away $1,300 worth of edible food, much of it driven by confusion over dates. Nearly half of consumers admit they discard food as soon as the sell-by stamp passes, even when it still smells and looks fine. This pattern ripples outward. Across the country, food waste piles up in landfills, releasing methane, a greenhouse gas dozens of times more potent than carbon dioxide. Food loss now accounts for up to 10% of global greenhouse emissions, rivaling the output of entire nations. The water and energy spent growing, transporting, and refrigerating these discarded groceries vanish with them. For a family living paycheck to paycheck, the price is steeper still. The margin between enough and not enough shrinks every time a still good meal is thrown out. Research shows that the way dates are framed, whether as a looming deadline or a gentle suggestion, shapes what ends up in the bin. A simple change in wording can nudge people to keep food longer, saving money and cutting waste. Yet the current system, with its jumble of labels and hidden buffers, quietly trains people to distrust their own senses. The result is a cascade of loss, wasted resources, higher grocery bills, and a burden that falls hardest on those who can least afford it. Reform is not just a technical fix. It is a chance to reclaim value at home, in the environment, and across the economy. In Sacramento, a policy advocate sits before a state committee urging a simple idea: one label for quality, another for safety. California's new law, set to take effect in 2026, will require all packaged foods except eggs and infant formula to use just two phrases: best if used by for quality and used by for safety. The goal is to erase the confusion that sends tons of perfectly good food to landfills every year. Across the country, lawmakers are watching closely. If this law succeeds, it could become the blueprint for national reform. But the path is crowded with obstacles. Food manufacturers worry about lawsuits and insurance claims if a single word is misread. Grocers say stricter rules could drive up costs. Even insurers are weighing in, warning that liability coverage might be pulled from companies that sell food past the old dates, even when the product is safe. In Denmark, a small grocery called WeFood opens its doors each morning with shelves stocked entirely from products past their printed dates. Every item is tested and tracked and sold at deep discounts, sometimes as much as 90% off. The store diverts hundreds of tons of food from waste every year, and it draws shoppers who want to save money and fight waste. Still, the model runs into resistance. Major suppliers hesitate, worried that selling past date products might set a precedent or expose them to lawsuits. Regulators demand rigorous testing, and some customers still view the bargains with suspicion. Developers in Silicon Valley are pitching smart sensors that track temperature and spoilage in real time. Imagine a carton of milk that pings your phone if the fridge warms up, or a sticker that changes color as bread nears the end of its safe life. The promise is precision, less guesswork, and less waste. But these tools remain expensive, and most groceries still rely on ink and paper dates. Reform is possible, and small glimpses of change are already visible. Yet every step forward runs into the tangled roots of habit and risk, and the stubborn power of a printed date. Right now, nearly 40% of food in the US is wasted. Much of that food is tossed because date labels are misunderstood and there is no standard. As inflation and climate pressures mount, every meal we throw away matters more. We still trust the numbers printed on packages more than our own senses. The real expiration date is not on the package, it is on the system itself. What would it take for you to trust your judgment again?